So let's do some problems out of mostly the chapter 2 material. Again, take a look at chapter 1 if you haven't already. Make sure you're familiar with some of the definitions in there. Not a lot of numeric problem solving or anything going on, just kind of what is microeconomics. So one type of problem we want to do is to find the market equilibrium if we're given a demand curve and a supply curve. So here we have quantity demanded, demand curve equals 1275 minus 25p, and quantity supplied equals 125 plus 75p. So how would we solve for the equilibrium? Remember, equilibrium is a price such that quantity demanded equals quantity supplied. So we know at equilibrium, the two Q's are equal. We can equate these two terms. We have 1275 minus 25p equals 125 plus 75p. All right, so now we just have to rearrange to solve for p. There's a number of ways you can do this. I brought the 25p over to this side and subtracted off the 125. All right, so just combining our constants and our p's, simplifying, and then we divide by 100 to get p equals 11 and a half. All right, so then how do we find the market quantity? We know that quantity demand should equal quantity supplied. So you can plug it into either equation, but it's usually best to check both equations to make sure you've done it right. All right, if we plug our price we found into the demand equation here, we get a quantity demanded of 987 and a half. If we plug that price into the supply equation, we get a quantity supplied equals 987 and a half. So we have found the price such that quantity demanded equals quantity supplied. All right, it's also useful to just kind of basically understand how you would go about graphing these equations. We'll talk about that a little bit later, I think kind of more a chapter 4 detail. So we'll come back to that. Another thing to keep in mind, I don't think I've assigned any questions in general because I think of equilibrium as a price such that these quantities are equal. You will be finding price first and then the quantities after that result, and they should be the same. But some questions in the past I've seen have asked you to solve for the quantities first. So just to keep in mind how you would do that, I don't think it'll be a main content. Maybe I'd assign it for an extra credit problem or something like that. But if we wanted to find the equilibrium quantity first, we would have to rearrange these equations to solve for P. So we could take this top one, put the 25p over here and subtract off the QD, and then we'd have to divide everything by 25. You can do the same thing down here to solve for P. Anyway, not going to be a main focus of our material, but it's something that you should keep in mind of how you would do it if you had to do it. Okay, so what about the elasticities? We had this idea of calculating elasticity at a given point. Here we have our supply and demand equations, and then we found the market equilibrium price and quantity. So what if we wanted to know the price elasticity of demand and of supply at that point? We have our arc elasticity formula that tells us that we can find the change in quantity over the change in price, multiply that by P over Q. We have P and Q, we just solve for that up here, right? So we can plug those in. Then we just need to find what is our change in quantity when we have a change in price. And since we're doing elasticity of demand, our demand equation will tell us that. So we come up here, how much does quantity change if we have a 1 unit change in price? This is telling us that if we have for every 1 unit change in price, quantity demanded decreases by 25. So this change in quantity demanded when we have a change in price is negative 25. We have everything we need to plug in here. We have our price, quantity, we have our slope, so to speak. So calculate that out. You should get something in the neighborhood of negative 0.29. And because that is an absolute value between 0 and 1, we know that the demand curve is inelastic at the equilibrium point. Yep. All right, elasticity of supply. All right, once again, we've already found P and Q, so we can plug those in. We need our change in now quantity supplied. When we have a change in price, we can find that from the supply curve. We know that for every unit change in price, we get a change of 75 in quantity supplied. So we plug our 75 in, calculate this, we get 0.87, meaning supply is also inelastic, but it's less inelastic than demand. Closer to zero in absolute value means more inelastic. Okay. So then just a couple examples of calculating elasticity for some given change. Suppose a textbook manufacturer charges $125 for their service. They currently sell 60 textbooks. If the manufacturer increased the price to 150, they would sell 55 textbooks. So we're going to use our midpoint method, our percent change formula. Here we're calculating for a change rather than at a point. So we want to use our percent change formula to calculate the percent change in quantity demanded and the percent change in price. Okay, so what we're going to do is take the new quantity minus the old quantity, divide that by the average. So we have our new quantity 55, old quantity, and we're taking the midpoint of the two. And then we have to do the same thing with price. So our new price is 150. The price was 125 divided by the midpoint, and we get our elasticity. Now, once again, between 0 and 1 means inelastic. All right, I've posted two more elasticity change problems, so just take a look at those. Let me know if you have any questions, any difficulties with any of this elasticity stuff. Hopefully this chapter is predominantly review. If there's anything you're struggling with, it's no worries, just reach out, we can get that cleaned up.